One thing I love about Rochester is that I can stand up here and sign to an audience who hears a woman's voice and they don't think anything of it. And that's not a typical situation. My personal life has taken me all over the country and all over the world. And I've had experiences where people stare at me because I'm signing. I've been to other countries where 20 or 30 people will stand around me and mock me, laughing, because they've never seen anybody sign before. But that's not true here in Rochester. Rochester has the highest number of deaf people per capita than any other place in the U.S. I can walk into a restaurant and meet a waiter who signs. I'm curious, how many of you all know sign? Or maybe some fingerspelling? That's pretty good. We're off to a good start. Here in Rochester, I can go to all these events. How often do deaf people and hearing people really interact? I believe strongly that there is a connection between the deaf and the hearing community here, and that it improves the Rochester community. For example, I will tell you about communities around the world. Deaf people in other places do not have the same opportunities that we have here in Rochester. I recently chatted with a mother who is deaf and lives in Massachusetts. She has 4 sons. She moved to Rochester. But back in Massachusetts, she had a parent-teacher conference, and she had to remind the school to be given an interpreter for the conference. When she moved here to Massachusetts, one of her sons had a medical emergency. She was in a hurry, she was freaking out, and when she arrived at the hospital, there was an interpreter waiting for her. She just had to call ahead and it was all worked out. And that's Rochester. In another country, they sign differently than here. And there is one interpreter to every 100 deaf people. When deaf people go to a doctor's appointment or to take a college test, they have to wait a long time. And we are really lucky that we have enough interpreters here every day that we can go to events and deaf people and hearing people can go together. And there are many people that can sign. And that's Rochester. But in other places, 95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. But there are places where people are living on $1 or $2 every day. And they've never seen a successful deaf person before. And so they want to know, why should they keep that deaf child? It's hard to imagine that deaf child growing up and being able to be a successful member of society and to be able to earn an income and give back to their family. I spent 1 month in Asia with kids that were aged 6 to 16. All of those kids were abandoned by their families because they were deaf. I've been to Tanzania, and they let me know that it was impossible for deaf kids to sometimes get the basic necessities that they needed. Sometimes deaf babies are left in the woods, or they are thrown in a valley to die. Mm, 95% of deaf children in other countries are never successful. They don't have those opportunities. They don't learn to read and write. They don't go to school. They don't get basic education or human rights. And in other countries, people are clueless about what deaf people are capable of. They don't realize that they can be equal with hearing people because they are judged every day and told that they will fail. And it's a continuous cycle. And deaf people around the world experience that. But that's not true in Rochester. I believe that we have a local community that can affect the world. People from Rochester go all over the world for business, for travel. And I see Rochester as a perfect community capable of showing people what hearing and deaf people can work together to do. But of course, deaf people in other countries face terrible situations, unlike here. They need the structure and support. They need to be understood. We are not mute. Just because we're deaf doesn't mean we can't talk. We are a deaf culture with a capital D. We have our own culture, our own language. We have our own stories and art and traditions and values. We want to be deaf. And we know that's a hard concept for hearing people to understand. But we really want to be deaf. We don't feel that deafness takes away anything from our lives. In fact, we think it adds a benefit. And we don't have hearing loss. We're called deaf. Sign language is a part of us. We support each other. We want people to learn sign and to realize that we have basic human rights. And signing is a part of who we are. And signing is also a part of every person in Rochester. Rochester has been very successful. But more than just noticing that there are many deaf people in Rochester, realizing that they are active and a part of the community is the way that things are done here. People learn about deaf culture and how to sign and how to understand each other. And it makes us a stronger community. And that's true of any culture. Before, in the 1800s, there was a man that knew many deaf. In Martha's Vineyard, there were many deaf people. And everybody knew sign. And even if you were standing far apart from someone else, you could sign even though you couldn't hear. And if a mother had a baby that was sleeping, to be quiet for the baby, they would sign in the house. There are people who remember that Martha's Vineyard culture from long ago and how everybody knew sign. But slowly, that culture began to fade away. But we want to build a society that is built on those principles. We want to be involved mentally and physically, and we don't want barriers to obstruct the things that we can do. We want to use universal design, not just for people who are in wheelchairs. I've met many hearing people who are very eager and interested in learning signing. And I've also met deaf people who are willing to share their experiences and their knowledge. And it becomes a bridge. Before, deafness was not considered a disability, and it created a community, a connected community. Today, I find that I can chat with hearing people. I can email them, I can talk on the phone. Oh, hearing people can email and they can talk on the phone as they're chatting, but that personal relationship is lost. That personal connection is lost. And it's a hard concept to express, the way that two people signing share that connectedness. Deaf people use their facial expressions and their body language.
It's more than 10 minutes.